And pensions will come to order for a hearing on an issue of enormous consequence, and I want to thank all of our panelists and guests who are here with us this morning. During the course of the morning, senators will be coming in and out, but I know that this is an issue of interest to every senator. In a moment, we will hear directly from educators from across our country about the enormous effort it takes to provide a quality public education for every child in our country. In my view, if we are serious about the need for a bright and hopeful future for our country, we understand that the children, the young people of this country, are our future. And there is, in fact, nothing more important that we can do than provide a quality education to all of our young people. And yet, for decades, public school teachers have been overworked, underpaid, understaffed, and maybe most importantly, underappreciated. Compared to many other occupations, our public school teachers are more likely to experience higher levels of anxiety, stress, and burnout, which was only exacerbated by the pandemic. As a result, nearly 8% of teachers leave their profession each and every year, double the rate in countries like Canada and countries around the world. According to the most recent statistics, some 300,000 teaching professions, nearly 10% of all teaching professions nationwide, have been left vacant or filled by teachers not fully certified for their assignments. In addition, teacher turnover rates are 50% higher in school districts with high poverty rates than districts that serve wealthier students. In other words, the areas where we need the best teachers the most are the areas where we're seeing the highest turnover. Incredibly, 44% of public school teachers are now quitting their profession within 5 years. Now, why is that? Why are so many public school teachers, people who came into the profession because of their love of kids and their wanting to do the right thing, why are they leaving that profession? Why do we have a massive shortage of teachers in America? Well, there are many reasons, but one of them, and one of the primary reasons, is the extremely low pay teachers receive. According to the statistics that I have seen, the average starting teacher salary in America is less than $45,000 a year. Nearly 40% of school districts in our country pay teachers a starting salary of less than $40,000. Incredibly, the average public school teacher in America is making nearly $100 a week less than she or he did 28 years ago after adjusting for inflation. In other words, the real salaries of teachers are actually going down in inflation-adjusted numbers. Wages for public school teachers are so low that in 36 states throughout America, the average public school teacher with a family of 4 qualifies for food stamps, public housing, or other government benefits. In America today, nearly 20% of public school teachers in our country are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs during the school year. Maybe they are driving an Uber, maybe they are waiting tables, maybe they're parking cars. In the richest country in the history of the world, seems to me that we have got to do a lot better than that. Meanwhile, because of lack of resources and tight school budgets, about 80% of public school teachers are forced to spend their own money on classroom supplies without being reimbursed, which comes out to about 13% of their first monthly paycheck. The situation has become so absurd, and this tells us not just about how we feel about education and teachers, but maybe our sense of priorities as a nation. The situation has become so absurd that 4 hedge fund managers on Wall Street made more money last year than every kindergarten teacher in America, nearly 120,000 teachers. 4 hedge fund managers, more money than 120,000 kindergarten teachers. Public school teachers should not be forced to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. They should not be forced to be on food stamps. Further, as bad as everybody in this room knows, it's not the teacher that keeps the classroom going. They need support service. And as bad as public school teachers are paid, our nation's school custodians, food service workers, and other school staff earn even less. In America today, nearly 40% of support staff in our public schools earn less than $25,000 a year. Now, it would seem to me that we would want as a nation to attract the best and the brightest people into the enormously important profession of education. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to encourage teachers to teach in underserved communities, if we're going to improve teacher retention and morale, and if we're going to improve student academic outcomes, then in my view, we need to pay teachers in America decent wages and decent benefits. Not a very, I think, radical or controversial concept. And that is why I've introduced the Pay Teachers Act with 9 of my colleagues this Congress. This bill would make sure that no teacher in America is paid less than $60,000 a year. It would increase wages for teachers who have made teaching their profession, those who have been on the job for 10, 20, or 30 years. It would triple Title I funding, get money into those school districts that need it the most. It would invest in federal programs that provide teachers with the training, education, and preparation they need to succeed, and it would benefit every public school district in our country. Now, here is the good news, and it is very good news. And that is a result of local organizing led by public school teachers. Some states are beginning to do the right thing. In recent years, the state of New Mexico has increased teacher pay by an average of 20%. State of Maryland recently became the first state in the country to require all teachers to be paid a competitive salary that is at least $60,000 a year by July of 2026. The state of Arkansas recently increased minimum teacher salaries from $36,000 a year to $50,000 and provided a minimum $2,000 raise for all teachers during the 23-24 academic year. And the state of Mississippi recently increased teacher pay by 11%. Raising teacher salaries to at least $60,000 a year and ensuring competitive pay for all of our teachers is one of the most important steps we can take to address the teacher shortage in America and to improve the quality of public education in our country. Bottom line, as everybody knows, the young people are our future. And we've got to deal with the reality that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major nation on earth, and that we are not attracting, because of inadequate salaries, the kinds of people we need into teaching. So let me just conclude by thanking the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of teachers in this country. You are heroes, you are heroines, you are doing enormously important work. You are saving children's lives every single day, and I thank you very much for what you do. Senator Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair Sanders. I too thank the teachers. I still remember the names of all my elementary school teachers. And particularly one who, they all, I think, believed in a guy with a lot of ADD, a young child, who couldn't focus, who didn't read during the day. And so one of them kept me afterwards and drove me home. Could you imagine that? She would drive me home after everybody had left because my ADD would not allow me to kind of focus. So I just applaud all the teachers. You are formative in a child's experience. But as we begin to speak about the current state of K through 12 education, we have to recognize the world as it is. 2/3 of U.S. public school students don't read proficiently in 4th grade. 40% are essentially non-readers. Almost 2/3 of 4th graders, 3/4 of 8th graders are below proficient in math. Less than half of public school parents Less than half say their child is definitely prepared academically for the next year. A related issue is the rising absenteeism. 28% of students miss nearly 4 weeks of the school year. Now, intuitively, but also borne out by research, students who miss more than 4 weeks have difficulty learning to read by 3rd grade. Think about that. These are not middle schoolers or high schoolers skipping out when their parents not watching. These are children less than their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and they're missing 4 weeks of school or more. And so if you don't learn to read by 3rd grade, you don't read to learn after that. How do we get here? Well, in many places, primary and secondary education is broken. Schools have lost sight of their core mission of educating children. Some education leaders prioritize social agendas and progressive ideology over academic progress. This negatively impacts children's success. It leaves them ill-prepared to enter a competitive workforce. Now, parents, studies show, are the most important indicators and educators in their children's life. I think I read once that the mother is the most determinative of a child's future and academic success, which, kind of illustrates it's the hand that rocks the cradle that rules the world. But unfortunately, many parents feel as if they've been forced to be bystanders or even silenced by fear of retaliation from school leaders. In 2023, 72% of parents considered moving their children to a new school, a 35% increase from 2022. Now, I have to point out that it's been more than a year and a half into this Congress, and we're just now having our first hearing on K through 12 education. We are the committee with jurisdiction over federal K through 12 funding, and we have a responsibility to examine this broken system. Our kids will spend roughly 15,000 hours in school between kindergarten and 12th grade. If they are not learning, what are they doing? I'm not sure throwing more money at the problem is the solution. The committee needs to determine root causes concerning the state of public education and how to fix it. Now, one thing that cannot be ignored, we are spending more money per child on education than ever before in our nation's history. Somebody's got a pretty good phone over there, but they need to turn it off. So if you look here, here's spending, here's inflation. So spending has greatly exceeded inflation. But even beginning before the pandemic, we saw a decrease in math scores and a decrease in reading scores. The reading is 4th grade, the math is 8th grade. Now, in 2021, Democrats, through a partisan bill, gave $121 billion in one-time COVID spending with little accountability or requirements for how the money would be used. And it begs the question, where was it spent? Some school districts added new faculty positions like assistant principals that have limited impact upon classroom learning. There are now more staff collecting paychecks at schools than ever before, and yet we see grades falling. Now let's be clear, teachers are important. For a child to learn, they must have a teacher focused on teaching. But there's evidence, anecdotal, teachers are overwhelmed by policies that prevent them from truly managing classrooms and in some cases ensuring the safety of their students. We'll hear more about this from one of our witnesses today. Now, the Democrat solution to this challenge has been to create a federal minimum salary for teachers. Improving teacher pay is important. In fact, out of 11 states that passed laws this year increasing take-home pay for teachers, 10 have Republican-led legislatures, including Louisiana. But the federal government dictating how states spend their money does not address the root cause of why teachers are struggling to teach in the classroom. More mandates and funding cannot be the only answer we come up with. We must examine broken policies that got us here and find solutions to improve. This should not be the only hearing Congress has examining education. We need to understand shortcomings in K through 12 and commit to resolving them so kids can read and become productive citizens. With 11 legislative weeks left, it seems we're not going to get to this, but the longer we wait, the more students suffer. We need to be looking at different issues about, for example, how to address the learning loss and severe mental health issues among adolescents as a result of COVID school closures. We need to implement better strategies like the science of reading to address falling literacy rates so children can read properly and do not fall behind. We need to begin to screen for dyslexia, a condition which affects 20% of children, but with undiagnosed condemns the child to underperformance. Now, we need to address how schools, the negative impact of TikTok and social media on students, and a phone should be in the classroom, and what are the costs of making school optional during the pandemic? What were those costs, as was done by many school districts across the nation? By the way, the committee also hasn't had a hearing to address our broken higher education system. We should be discussing the botched rollout of the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, that delayed millions of students and families from accessing crucial financial aid information. Without this information, students don't know if and how they can afford college and may just decide not to attend. We need to address the rising cost of college that is crushing students and families, forcing them to take on more loans, which may or may not return on their investment. And we need to hold universities and the Biden administration accountable for the rising rate of anti-Semitism on campuses, which have culminated in violence and chaos. With the limited time left we have this Congress, I urge the chair to prioritize how we can help our students and keep them from falling behind. Our children, our country's future is at stake. With that, I yield.
We will now turn to our witnesses, and we thank all of them for being here. Our first witness is Mr. John Arthur, the 2021 Utah Teacher of the Year and National Teacher of the Year finalist. He is now entering his 12th year of teaching 6th grade at Meadowlark Elementary, a Title I school in Salt Lake City, Utah. Mr. Arthur, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, and distinguished members of the committee.
If you could talk a little bit closer into the mic, please.
Absolutely. This is just like being in my classroom. Thank you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my love of teaching and insights from my classroom. My name is John Arthur, as you said, and again, I am the 2021 Utah Teacher of the Year, a National Board Certified Teacher, and a proud member of the National Education Association. For the last 11 years, I have dedicated my professional life to uplifting and educating the children at Meadowlark Elementary, a Title I public school in Salt Lake City. As we consider the challenges facing public school teachers today, there is one statistic that worries me the most. The majority of American parents do not want their children to become teachers. My mother, who was a Korean immigrant, was one of those parents. Suka Arthur, like so many immigrant parents, wanted me to grow up to be a doctor or a lawyer. When I finally worked up the courage to let my mother know that I was going to be a public school teacher, she asked, "Doctor teacher?" I said, "No, I'm an elementary school teacher." I don't want to read into the record what my mother said after that, but she was upset. Not because she didn't respect teachers, quite the opposite. In Korea, teachers hold a position of high esteem and receive high pay, prestige, and respect. That's what my mom wanted for her son. That's what doctors and lawyers receive in the United States, and that's what I want for every public school teacher in this country: high pay, prestige, and respect. You used to be able to raise a family on a teacher's salary. Now, the only reason I'm able to be a public school teacher is because my wife makes much more money than me. I appreciate the attention the chairman brought to this issue through the Pay Teachers Act, and the number one reason we have to appreciate when we're talking about root causes, like Senator Cassidy mentioned, the number one reason teachers leave the profession is the pay. The number one reason parents don't want their children to become teachers is the pay. So the number one solution to addressing the issues we face must be increasing teacher salaries. In teaching, prestige is rooted in relationships and professional practices. And there is no relationship more important than the ones we build with our students and their families. When I became a teacher, I knew I wanted to plant deep roots, teach in one school, and build powerful relationships with parents for the next 30 years. Sometimes when I'm writing really fast, I accidentally miswrite parents as partners. because that's how I see them. I'd like to thank, in this moment, it's like the Oscars here, I'd like to thank every parent I've ever partnered with in my classroom. We teachers also build communities of our own. In my first year of teaching, I saw teachers in my district step outside the comfort of their classrooms to advocate and champion the children in mine. I was inspired by them, and that's why I joined the Salt Lake Education Association, the Utah Education Association, and the National Education Association, because I wanted to be a champion for our public school teachers and children just like them. In my second year of teaching, I saw teachers delivering lessons and carrying on conversations with kids like conductors in an orchestra. And when I found out that they were all national board certified teachers, I said, I want that too. So I was immediately embraced by a community composed of our country's most accomplished educators. I pursued my national board certification, and I learned that no teacher survives in isolation and thrives alone. In order to strengthen the teaching profession, we have to support and uplift the communities and organizations that make teachers strong. Teachers are driven by a powerful need to be better for the children we serve. That's why we pursue advanced degrees and certifications. During my Master of Arts in Teaching program, I began working with two students. One of them had dyslexia, and the other one had an emotional disturbance, had been identified in that way. I realized very quickly that I did not have the tools to support these kids the way they needed to be. So I already had one student loan going, so I said, rack it up. And I added a second master's degree program to my caseload, to my workload. I got a special education master's in education. And I recognize now that in order to increase the level of respect that people have for teachers, all we need to do is shine a spotlight on our best and brightest educators, elevating the excellence that America's teachers exemplify. Senators, there are teachers in your home states that are right now leading from their classrooms, and all you have to do is show the public the wonders that they are, and the hearts of even our harshest critics can be moved. You remember my mother, who did not want me to be a teacher. Just before she passed away, she left me this email. She said, "Hi, son, this is Omma. I just want to say I am so proud of you as a teacher. You're a great teacher. You're a wonderful son. I love you." I followed my heart into teaching, and my love for teaching won my mother's heart too. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next witness is Mr. Jamaal Keys, a special education teacher at Gilbert Spronce Elementary School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and a graduate of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers Paraprofessional to Teacher program. Mr. Keys, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Senator Sanders and the committee for addressing this critical issue. My name is Jamaal Keys. A little closer? Like this? Here we go. Okay. My name is Jamaal Keys, and I am an educator and a member of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers and AFT Local. On behalf of the PFT, the AFT, and my colleagues, again, I want to thank you, Chairman Sanders, and the committee for addressing this critical issue. I teach middle year special education in the third largest elementary school in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Philadelphia and educated in Philadelphia public schools. I am a product of teachers who molded me into a lifelong learner and have left an indelible mark on my life. Just last week, after 18 years with the School District of Philadelphia, I completed my first year as a classroom teacher. While this is the third position I've held in my district, starting my career as a bus attendant, I've spent most of my career in education as a paraprofessional, and that's how I stumbled upon what I would find was my calling. For the entirety of my 18-year career, I've worked in the same school, primarily with students who have disabilities and complex needs. And I've worked alongside veteran teachers, all of whom are now retired. Those now retired veteran teachers told me that I was meant to be a teacher, even when I didn't see it. At the time I moved into my career as a paraprofessional, the starting salary was $16,000 with a maximum salary of $30,000 per year, and it's still pretty much the same. For those of you who don't know, paraprofessionals work alongside teachers to keep the train on the track, so to speak. And they're essential for working with students who need additional attention and support. So as I began to recognize that I did want to pursue a career as teaching, I also started looking into schooling. My major concern with going to school was going into debt. I ultimately understood that it was necessary to get to where I needed to be in my career. I obtained my associate's degree in early childhood education with honors. I continued to earn my bachelor's degree in the same area. At that time, I had the option to obtain my teaching certification while doing my coursework, but this also meant that I would have to take an unpaid leave from my job to complete the student teaching component. And this was something that I could not afford to do. At the same time, my union, the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, was in the early stages of negotiating our next contract, and I used this time to speak with my union leadership about my journey to becoming a teacher and some of the obstacles. It was from this meeting that the seeds for the Para Pathways program were planted. As our district was facing vacancies, my union and the district agreed that the best potential teachers were already hard at work in classrooms, serving children daily as paraprofessionals, and that alleviating barriers would allow access to the teacher pathway. The Para Pathways program became part of our contract and eliminated as much of the financial burden as possible, ultimately making obtaining a degree cost-free for paraprofessionals in the program with a commitment, multi-year commitment for teaching in Philadelphia public schools. Through the Pathways program, I entered the teacher residency program, which meant I would work for 1 year under a mentor teacher in a Title I school while taking coursework to obtain my master's degree in special education. Many don't understand that you're not only responsible for content, but you also take on many roles in the classroom based on the needs of your students, all starting with a salary of around $45,000. Teachers are constantly putting money back into the classroom for everything from school supplies to snacks for hungry children. In just this school year alone, I've spent over $1,000 on those things just so that I can be effective at what I do. Even as a teacher, I still have an additional part-time job. On top of personal monetary contributions for teachers in special education, there's also hours of paperwork that cannot possibly be completed during the workday if we're expected to actually teach and work with our students. According to a report in 2023 that PA Needs Teachers, it stated that there are 2,015 teacher vacancies. This means that Philadelphia is facing a severe shortage. And at the start of next school year, there will be 100 paraprofessionals who have gone through the Pathways program. If there's no steady pipeline of teachers coming in from outside of this program, things won't change in the profession. As a teacher, I wake up every day and make a choice to be an urban educator in a district where many of the school buildings are crumbling from decades of deferred maintenance and have issues with asbestos, and where many of my students have diverse needs. I hope that school districts look at the success of the Pathways program and decide to invest in school employees, grow your own programs. And I also hope that the federal government can make providing funding for those programs a priority and invest in teachers like Senator Sanders pay our teachers at proposes with a starting salary of $60,000. Other countries take their education seriously and they value their educators. So I hope that you guys in Congress, who are the policymakers that shape education in America, can do the same. Thank you for letting me share my experience with the committee today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Keys, for all that you're doing in your testimony. Our next witness is Dr. William Kirwan, the Chancellor Emeritus of the University System of Maryland and the former chair of the Maryland Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. Dr. Kirwan, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Cassidy and committee members. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the recently enacted pre-K through 12 education reform legislation in Maryland entitled The Blueprint for Maryland's Future. The Blueprint is a multi-year, comprehensive plan that addresses all aspects of children's education from birth to high school completion, including most especially the recruitment, retention, and compensation of high-quality teachers. To understand the magnitude and rationale of the changes called for in the Blueprint, I need to take you back to the fall of 2016, when the Governor and General Assembly asked me to chair a 27-member commission, the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. The charge to the commission was bold: make recommendations so that Maryland's pre-K through 12 system will perform as well as the top-performing school systems in the world. The commission spent 3 years examining in great depth the elements of several of the world's highest performing school systems, including Finland, Shanghai, China, Singapore, and Ontario, Canada. These systems all scored at or near the top on international student assessments, and almost all of their students completed a rigorous course of high school study. During the Commission's work, we discovered a remarkable thing. Even though the high-performing systems we studied were on 3 different continents and operated in various economic, political, and cultural contexts, they all adhered to 5 basic principles that led to their success. First, invest in early childhood development and education. Second, prepare, compensate, and treat teachers like true professionals. Third, develop a fully aligned, periodically updated, and rigorous K-12 instructional system. Fourth, invest significantly in students needing the most support to be successful. And fifth, require a high degree of accountability at the school level. These principles became the 5 pillars of the Commission's recommendations. Our recommendations were sent to the General Assembly, incorporated into the blueprint for Maryland's future legislation, and enacted in 2021. In my written testimony, I briefly described the elements of the 5 pillars and how they were built through the extensive research we did on high-performing systems internationally. Given the focus of this hearing, I'll restrict my oral comments to the blueprint's Pillar 2, high-quality teacher recruitment and retention. The Commission observed that in every country it studied with high-performing school systems, teaching is a well-regarded and well-compensated profession that attracts talent similar to other high-status professions in these countries. Their teacher preparation programs are rigorous and certification standards are high. Moreover, teachers are treated as true professionals. They are given a significant degree of classroom autonomy and actively engage in research on upgrading curricula and improving pedagogy. Pillar 2 of the blueprint is built on the strategies embraced by these high-performing systems. Maryland's teacher preparation programs are in the process of upgrading the rigor of their curriculum, and the State Department of Education is raising certification standards. The blueprint's principle for teacher compensation is that as professionals, teachers should be compensated at the same level as other professionals requiring similar levels of education, such as architects and CPAs. Based on a comparison of starting salaries in these similar professions, as the chairman said, the blueprint sets the starting salary for all teachers at $60,000, no later than July 1, 2026. We are delighted to see that the Pay Teachers Act independently reached the same conclusion on compensation levels for teachers. However, the blueprint goes much further in addressing compensation and the work environment for teachers. To ensure high-quality teachers are incentivized to stay in the classroom, the blueprint includes a career ladder for teachers modeled on what we learned from the high-performing systems. The career ladder has multiple rungs of advancement and compensation based on a teacher's classroom success with students. To be and stay on the career ladder, a teacher must be board certified by the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. There is ample research-based evidence that board certification improves a teacher's classroom effectiveness. The blueprint provides an annual $10,000 bonus for board certification. Teachers can also earn an additional $7,000 annually for teaching in schools serving communities with a high concentration of poverty. With the blueprint, successful teachers could earn 6-figure salaries after a half dozen years in the profession. A U.S. Department of Ed national survey showed that Maryland led the nation in the increase of students entering teacher preparation programs, an encouraging sign that the blueprint strategies for treating teachers as true professionals are already having an impact. Mr. Chairman, if you will permit me, I'll conclude with this thought. As you have noted, one of our nation's most significant challenges today is the declining quality of pre-K through 12 education. Student absenteeism is at an all-time high, and teacher shortages are at crisis levels in most states. Our nation's students do not perform well on international assessments. Alarm bells should be ringing across the country. Our nation simply can't sustain its global leadership in the decades to come if our children don't have access to an education at the level presently offered in other advanced countries. The Blueprint's goal is to ensure that Maryland's children receive as good an education as students anywhere else in the world, and the state has made a remarkable commitment to achieve that end. We hope the Blueprint will become a model for other states to emulate. Our nation's children need and deserve no less. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Senator Cassidy, do you want to introduce your panelists?
Yes, please. It's my privilege to introduce our fourth witness, Mr. Robert Pondiscio. Mr. Pondiscio is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute on their education policy team. He left his career in journalism to become a fifth-grade teacher at a struggling school in the South Bronx. Now he's a recognized and respected expert in curriculum, teaching, and school choice. We're thankful to have your perspective today, sir. Please.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to discuss the challenges faced by America's classroom teachers. I'm Robert Pondiscio, a senior fellow in education policy at the American Enterprise Institute. It is truly an honor to be here. In 2002, as Senator Cassidy mentioned, I left a career in publishing, and I took an 80% pay cut to teach fifth grade in a South Bronx public school. I did this willingly, even proudly. I wasn't thinking about what I would make. I was thinking I'd make a difference. When I reflect on my days in the classroom and teaching as a profession, I don't think about paychecks, staffing, or per pupil funding. I think about the things that get in the way of teachers' success. Teachers are told they must know the why behind every decision we make in the classroom. If we expect higher pay to improve student outcomes, if that is the why, then I fear we'll be disappointed. Higher pay does not ease the burden we place on teachers or add hours to their day. The problem we seldom discuss is that we have made teaching too hard for mere mortals. Teaching is the easiest job in the world to do badly. It's the hardest job to do well. Make no mistake, America's teachers, most of the 4 million men and women who do it full-time, strive to excel. Visit a struggling school and you will meet people who are trying hard but failing. So I'd like to focus on some of the factors behind those failures, the factors that lead to teacher frustration and burnout, and that higher pay will not change. Poor teacher preparation, deteriorating classroom conditions, shoddy curriculum, and the quasi-therapeutic roles teachers are now expected to play in addition to their core academic roles. Bluntly, we are asking teachers to do too many things for them to do any of them well. The U.S. already spends significantly more per student than the OECD average, yet student achievement remains static, as Senator Cassidy pointed out, despite increased spending and staffing. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that 84% of teachers feel there isn't enough time to complete their work. 68% feel their jobs are overwhelming. Nearly half of new teachers leave the classroom within 5 years. No profession sends its people to work more poorly prepared than education. That same Pew poll found that only 36% of teachers feel they have the resources they need, and only 1/3 are satisfied with their training or professional development opportunities. The former head of the National Council on Teacher Quality, Kate Walsh, criticized the inadequate preparation of teachers. She likened it to a hazing ritual. And invariably, the teachers who struggle the most are in front of the students who can afford it the least. When the teacher is unprepared, forced to learn on the job, and struggling, students do not get a do-over. They only fall further behind. Why do good teachers leave? Primarily, it's not the pay. Student behavior is out of control, creating intolerable classroom conditions that drive teachers away. A 2022 National Education Association poll showed that nearly half of all teachers plan to quit due to school climate and safety. An EdWeek survey last year found over 70% of teachers reported increased disruptive behavior since 2019. A shocking 40% of teachers have faced physical violence from students. Louisiana's State Superintendent of Education, Cade Brumley, recently advocated for removing habitually disruptive students from classrooms to allow teachers to teach and students to learn. That view is refreshing but rare. Teachers often find themselves blamed for student misbehavior, told that more engaging lessons would prevent student disruption. Another under-discussed issue is curriculum. A RAND study found that nearly all teachers in America create or select their own instructional material, spending hours each week that could be better used analyzing student work, giving feedback, building relationships with students and parents, or developing their own expertise. Social and emotional learning has added another layer of responsibility for teachers who are now expected to act as something like therapists and social workers. Teachers may be unqualified or unsuited for these responsibilities with potential negative consequences for students. The inconvenient fact is that we need 4 million men and women to staff America's public school classrooms. A number that large means that by definition, they will be ordinary people, not saints, not superstars. Improving outcomes, not a little, but by a lot, requires making the job doable by the teachers we have, not the teachers we wish we had. So by all means, raise teacher pay, but do not assume that it will solve teacher shortages or keep good teachers in the classroom. Poor training, deteriorating classroom conditions, shoddy curriculum, and spiraling demands have made an already challenging job nearly impossible to do well and sustainably. Good teachers deserve our thanks, our praise, and to make a decent living. More importantly, they deserve the opportunity to make a difference. Thank you.
I would like to now introduce our fifth witness, Ms. Nicole Neely. Ms. Neely is the president and founder of Parents Defending Education, a national grassroots nonprofit empowering parents to advocate for classrooms that educate. She's a leader in the Parents' Right movement and founded Speech First, a national campus free speech organization. I chuckled when I read that you're also the mother of 2 school-age children. I told folks my hair turned gray when my daughters became 2 teenagers, so you look better than I do. We're also grateful to have you here with us today to share what parents are concerned about when it comes to their children's education. Ms. Neely.
Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me today. We are grateful that the committee has finally turned its attention to education. America faces a lost generation of students who were negatively impacted by decisions made during the pandemic. NAEP scores have shown the proficiency levels in core subjects fell precipitously due to school closures. So today's hearing is a bit of a mystery because the issues that parents care about are not the ones that are being discussed today. Families worry about the quality of their children's education. 2023 NAEP scores dropped across the country at all grade levels. In Vermont, 8th grade math proficiency dropped 11 points, down to 27%. In Pennsylvania, it dropped 12 points to 27%. And in Oklahoma, it dropped 10 points. Only 16% of children are proficient in math. But that's not all. In students in America, they cannot read. In Virginia, only 32% of 4th graders are proficient in reading. In Minnesota, only 30% of 8th graders are. And in New Mexico, only 18% of 8th graders are. Yet districts are eliminating advanced classes in the name of equity, claiming that gifted and talented programs are racist if enrollment doesn't mirror community demographics. In schools where AP classes have been eliminated, parents have watched their children regress to the level of their least able classmate. Brilliant students are discouraged from getting too far ahead because inequity perpetuates systemic racism. Hard work, objectivity, and self-reliance are traits that made the American economy the envy of the world. Yet now those characteristics are derided as white supremacy. Kids are in school for approximately 7 hours each day, but instead of using that time to address learning loss, it's spent on identity politics. In Lawrence, Kansas, elementary school students marched to celebrate Black Lives Matter at School Week, at a school where only 32% of children are proficient in math. In Appleton, Wisconsin, teachers were given resources recommending that students do privilege walks in a district where only 38% of middle schoolers are proficient in reading and math. America's education system is failing the very students it was designed to serve. Trust between parents and districts has shattered. For decades, public schools have operated in loco parentis, and administrators worked with families in the best interest of students. Pandemic-era closures fractured this bond. It's hard to say that districts prioritize learning when groups like the Chicago's Teachers Union asserted that the push to reopen schools was rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny, and the head of the LA Teachers Union said, there is no such thing as learning loss. Our kids didn't lose anything. It's okay that our babies may not have learned their timetables. They learned resilience. They know the words insurrection and coup. But there has been a shift away from partnering with families to working against families. Consider parental exclusion policies, which explicitly state that parents don't have the right to know their child's gender identity at school. PDE has identified nearly 1,100 districts around the country with these policies impacting over 11.4 million children. Although framed as a safety issue, school officials are already mandatory reporters. If an employee thinks at a school that the student is in danger, they are legally obligated to file a report. America spends billions of dollars on mental health. Perhaps teachers shouldn't tell children that mommy and daddy won't love them if they change genders, and that the solution is to lead a double life. Another area of concern is school safety. CDC data shows a rise in drug overdose deaths among adolescents between 2019 and 2021, while another report suggests that 20 to 30 non-fatal overdoses occur for every death. In Massachusetts, one student's kill list was swept under the rug by the superintendent, who called for empathy for the creator of the list while creating an LGBTQIA+ affinity group and anti-bias training for the district. Frequently, parents find out about school-based incidents via social media or local news, not from the schools themselves. And following October 7th, Jew hatred has swept across K-12 schools, just like on college campuses, yet lesson plans about blood libel and swastikas on mirror go ignored. This unequal adjudication of civil rights law threatens to undermine not only faith in our education system, but the rule of law writ large. Schools don't have a resource issue, they have an allocation issue. There's a saying, don't tell me where your priorities are, show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you what they are. Education leaders routinely choose to spend money on programs and personnel that don't directly benefit students. Like Glassbrook Elementary in California, where only 15% of students are proficient in math, which spent $250,000 on woke kindergarten. Federal data shows that between 2000 and 2019, the student population grew 7.9% and the teacher population grew 8.7%, yet administrators grew 87.6%. Why? DEI. The Heritage Foundation documented the growth of chief diversity officer positions in K-12 districts, finding that standardized test results show that achievement gaps are growing wider over time in districts with CDOs. Maybe it's not the lack of money that's the problem, but instead how the money is being spent. We want our children to stay in classrooms to learn how to read and write, not march for climate change. We want our children to know how to get the right answer in math class, not be told that showing their work is white supremacy. We want our children to be safe when we drop them off, and we don't want teachers to tell them to keep secrets from mom and dad. Fixing the American education system is hard, which is why it is essential to identify and grapple with the real problems and not pre-election sloganeering. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the witnesses. In one way or another, you all touched on issues that go beyond the classroom, what's going on in our country. So I'd like to start off by asking Mr. Arthur and Mr. Keys and Dr. Kirwan, what are some of the realities that teachers are experiencing in the classroom? How many of our kids are walking into school from dysfunctional families? How many kids may be sleeping out in cars? How many kids have seen violence in their community and with the trauma that that might bring about? How many kids are suffering from emotional disturbances which are acting out in the classroom, making the teacher's job that much more difficult? Mr. Arthur, what are teachers around the country seeing in their classrooms?
Chairman, the answer to your question is too many. All of your questions can be summed up by too many of our children are struggling, too many of our families are hurting, and as you mentioned, and was mentioned by other speakers, we are understaffed, under-resourced, and underprepared to deal with this moment because no one has experienced this moment in history before. Nobody has learned how to teach during a pandemic in our country's history. We didn't know what we were doing, but we did it anyway and we got it done. And every teacher right now who is in the classroom who taught through the pandemic, we're not just teachers anymore, we're survivors. And as we try to give each other grace, as we deal with these large issues and try to figure out how it is that we best come through this, I think that the strongest show of support that we could make to our classroom teachers and our students and our parents and our families is just to recognize we're doing something unprecedented. And as we do that, we're going to fumble, we're going to try, but you cannot do something remarkable if you're under-resourced. We do need more tools and more means of making this happen.
Keys, what are teachers in the classroom in Philadelphia seeing in their kids? Kids coming in, well-fed, et cetera.
I'll have to agree with much of what Mr. Arthur said. Not only are they coming to school, no, they're coming to school from traumatic experiences, traumatic backgrounds, and a lot of the issue has to do with things that they see in their environment. And a lot of what they see in their environment has to do with what they see in society. Things like Black Lives Matter and racism and all of those kind of things. I spent a year working with high school autistic support students with autism, and it just baffled me how aware they were about the political climate and just things that are going on, because I normally work with younger kids. So some of the questions that they came to me with and some of their concerns were very adult and had to do with racism. It had to do with gun laws. It had to do with elections. They're aware of these things, and those things weigh heavily on them.
Okay, thank you. Let me jump to Dr. Kirwan. Congratulations for doing what we don't do enough in this country, and look to what's working in other countries around the world. You mentioned early childhood
Yes,
education as one of the 5 principles.
right.
The general assumption is that in a nation where most working class people, mom and dad, are both working, what is the quality of early childhood education that allows kids to do well in the first grade in this country right now?
Senator, can I tell you what we're doing in Maryland now through the blueprint on this very issue?
What did you see? I mean, what I want to know is, our kids, mom and dad have to work, because
Yes.
despite some people's thought that we're the envy of the world economically, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to put bread and food on the table.
Right.
All right? Is our child care system in this country providing well for the kids, enabling them to do well as they enter school?
No, it is not.
What are you doing about it in Maryland?
Well, it's a very important component of the blueprint. It's pillar 1 of the blueprint. And so we've done a number of things. We've created and expanded centers around the state that work with low-income parents from 0 to 3 on issues of nutrition, child rearing, child development. We've also, as part of the blueprint, created free, full-day, high-quality preschool for all low-income children. We've seen
How has that
already.
been received? Are people taking advantage
Oh,
of it?
absolutely. And except, yes, they are. And we've seen already in our assessments of, at kindergarten level, are children ready to learn, a significant increase in Maryland because of these preschools. You know, it has another benefit, not just for the children. When there is free, full-day preschool available, parents can work. And it has a benefit for the family beyond just the development of the child.
That's a very important point. Senator Cassidy?
Just to make the point, because people have spoken about children not being able to, being hungry or not having glasses, that sort of thing. But I will point out that we have federal programs which provide free lunch and breakfast for high poverty districts. And there is the early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and prevention program, part of Medicaid, which screens for vision. I'm not minimizing the challenges, but I also don't want to ignore that which has already been done. And Dr. Kirwan, I know we both know that Maryland has both these programs. Ms. Neely, look at that. Spending is way up relative to inflation. Oh, I should also say I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a report from the Illinois policy showing that Chicago public school spending has increased 97%, while student achievement has dropped by 63% in reading and 78% in math. Without objection. Without objection. Ms. Neely, look at that. How do we begin to restore the trust when folks say we need to spend more money, but we see so much more money being spent, and yet scores are falling?
Well, let's remember that this illustrious body spent $187 billion in the wake of the pandemic to address learning loss. In the state of Wisconsin, 28.2% More than 1 out of every $4 of Wisconsin ESSER money was allocated towards new additions or renovations, despite that not addressing learning loss. When all those bills were passed, I think many parents, myself included, assumed that it would be to help reopen schools, for masks, for air purifiers, for sanitation. That is not what that ESSER money was spent on. It was spent on pet projects, it was spent on social emotional learning, it was spent on things like that, and in many cases, districts did not open. Children in inner cities were set back years and years and years. I mean, I remember seeing from Virginia, one of the Virginia's Education Association speakers said that the nice thing about this is that everyone went back equally. That's not true. Everyone wasn't set back equally by the pandemic. Those who were more set back were families that didn't have the time or resources to help their children read, to pay for tutors or things like that. This disproportionately hurt low-income students more than anyone else. You have more money that has been thrown at schools. They can't spend it fast enough. All this ESSER money is running out at the end of this September. And yet now we still see teacher shortages. Let's talk about in Hartford, they're about to lay off 300 teachers. In San Diego, they just laid off 234 and are announcing that they're laying off 60 more. There are teachers coming out of our ears. They're not in the right places right now. So we don't have a teacher shortage, we have an allocation issue. And that is what is hugely concerning, particularly when we look at the fact that our children cannot read. They are not thriving, they are doing very, very badly.
Mr. Pondiscio, you were nodding your head yes as she spoke. What would you add to her comments?
As a former teacher, now policy advocate, I remember my first days in the policy world, and it was a surprise to me, then and still is, how little those of us who think of ourselves as policymakers spend thinking about what kids do all day. Curriculum, instruction, school culture. Perhaps it's because I'm a former teacher. Those are that's the focus of my work, and I think that is we give insufficient attention to that. I would call your attention to a remarkable series of reports over the last couple of years produced by a woman named Emily Hanford of American Public Media, who has documented the frankly appalling way that we teach reading to children in America. And it's fascinating because it says something about our expert class, it says something about teacher training, that we know how to do this, we've trained teachers badly. Her reports were called Hard Words and Sold. Please.
It seems as if you are indicting teacher training, very much so, that universities, colleges are doing a poor job of preparing teachers for the classroom.
No question.
Is there a statistical relationship between some universities and their Department of Educations and poor performance by their graduates in certain schools?
Oh, I'm sure there is, but I think perhaps at the risk of painting with too broad of a brush, the larger problem is that I'm not sure that our colleges of education view it as their job to train teachers. In my written testimony...
Wait, I'm sorry, that just strikes me as odd.
Yes, that's correct, Senator, and it should strike you as odd. In other words, they may be more concerned with your professional disposition and with theory, as opposed to the practical means of controlling a classroom, of curriculum, of instruction.
And in my limited time, Mr. Keys points out that some of the kids do present with emotional disorder, et cetera. You point out that teachers are being asked to wear many hats, and so therefore it distracts them from their primary function. But granted that some kids, now granted it may be the kids who are from a poorer background,
sure.
What do we do about that kind of set of issues that are there in addition to?
And I don't want to diminish the reality of that, Senator. It's absolutely a fact. The question that we seldom ask is why is it, or why are we asking what in many cases is the poorest performing institution in a community to do more, to be a social services provider, to provide services beyond their core function. In other words, are there NGOs, are there other organizations in a stressed out community that would be better suited to be a mental health provider, to be a social services provider, than putting all of this on the back of our teachers?
So a school-based clinic with mental health professionals embedded within a school with a high need would be a better alternative than asking teachers to do that.
That's complicated, whether it should be based in the school. Again, the need is real, whether you want a low-functioning institution, with all respect, to be the service provider and supervise and hold that service accountable is the question to be asked.
Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for appearing here today, and especially to our teachers on the panel. You do the essential work of educating our children, oftentimes doing whatever it takes to ensure that your students have access to the information and materials that they need to learn. But we know that comes at a cost, and we need to make more investments in you, our nation's educators. Wisconsin is facing what our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. Jill Underly, has referred to as an education workforce in crisis. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction recently released their annual report on educator preparation and workforce in our state. This year's report found that we have shortcomings, including with teacher retention. 4 out of every 10 teachers either leave the profession or leave the state in their first 6 years. This shortage of teachers is especially pronounced when it comes to special education teachers. 74% of the schools in Wisconsin state that they have 1 or more vacancies for a special education educator, and more than a third of those schools were not able to find a teacher to fill that vacancy. Dr. Kirwan, I want to thank you for your testimony. Educators are the key in-school factor for student success, and I appreciate your testimony's focus on the need to support and pay them accordingly. I want to focus on the 4th pillar of Maryland's plan related to investments in students from low-income families and multilingual learners and students with disabilities. Last year, the House Education Appropriations Bill crafted by the House Republicans would have cut federal education investment by 80% for Title I-A. That's a program that's intended to provide extra support to schools serving low-income students. It also proposed eliminating the $890 million Title III program that supports multilingual learners. And it proposed cutting $2 billion for the Supporting Effective Instruction State Grant Program. This year, their planned cuts to non-defense spending looks likely to produce a bill that does much of the same that I just described them drafting last year. So does this sound like the approach of the high-performing systems that the commission reviewed? And what would be the ramifications? And can you say something about the government buy-in in those other countries, Finland, Singapore, in Canada, for their high-performing systems?
Yes, thank you, Senator Baldwin, for that question. As you noted, one of the principles that we discovered in these high-performing systems is the investment they make in students with the greatest need, and including most especially students coming from low-income families. And so that's why the blueprint has really focused on what we call community schools. A community school in Maryland is one that is serving 55% or more low-income students. And these schools get significantly extra funding for tutors, for after-school academic programming, for summer academic program. They have extra health services in the school. They have a coordinator who can connect children in those schools with the social services in the region. And so it's our recognition that we need to concentrate resources on these kids that are growing up in very difficult circumstances. And so any kind of reduction in Title I funding would just, in my mind, exacerbate the problems we're facing.
Thank you. Mr. Keys, as communities grapple with the shortage of teachers, more schools are establishing so-called grow your own programs. These programs are often focused on either introducing and encouraging high school students to pursue the field of education or providing programs focused on helping individuals already in the profession, such as para-educators and substitute teachers gaining teachers' licenses. You have a remarkable story on how you came to the education profession, starting as a school bus attendant. I understand you worked as a paid teacher resident while earning your teaching credential and master's degree in special education. Can you explain the paraprofessional to teacher program you participated in and the benefits of these grow your own programs and how the federal government can better support these programs.
Okay, the paraprofessional to teacher program that I was a part of, it's called Parapathways. Pretty much what it does is open up the pathway to teaching to the paraprofessional staff, many of whom, like myself, have been working in that paraprofessional position for years. I was a paraprofessional for 16 years, and what it does is it looks at the paraprofessionals based on their level of schooling. If you got some credits, college credits, you start off on this one. If you got a bachelor's, you start here. If you got an associate's, you start here. I went through the residency program because I had my bachelor's, and what that did was that put me in a position to work under a mentor teacher for a whole school year, meaning I didn't have to do any student teaching. I didn't have to have a period of time where I was without pay. And to me, the benefit of that was I got to learn the ins and outs of the paperwork side of it, because when you're working in education and when you work with children every day, regardless of if you're certified or not, you know how to teach. You know how to be there for your students on every level, from bus attendant to paraprofessional. You work with these kids every day, you know what you're doing. What that Pathways program does is gives an insight on what it takes to deliver the curriculum, what it takes to be effective at the way that you deliver the curriculum, what it takes to understanding for me, the special education laws and the ins and outs of what it is to be a special educator. It also gives you a kind of inside look on some of the different challenges that you're going to face when going into the classroom. Now, with that Pathways program, some of the people who were in the residency portion didn't go through that Pathways program. There were people coming from corporate America, coming from the military, because that residency program is open to anyone that wants to be a teacher. And what I realized, and what my school, Temple University, realized, that a lot of the people coming from outside of education, they don't have a clue what it's like in the classroom. And some of them didn't even make it through the program, and some of them made it through the program, but once they got in the classroom on their own, they didn't make it. We have some who quit less than a year in. So I think, for me, the Grow Your Own type of program, you have people who have been doing the job. You have people who want to do the job. The only thing that's holding them back is the financial part. I know myself, what held me back years from going back to school was the financial aspect of it, was going into debt. Like I said, as a classroom assistant, $16,000 is what you start with, $30,000 is what you end with. Me looking at that and everything else that I have to do, rent, food, taking care of myself, paying for school, was like, can't do that. But with this program, it makes it accessible. It makes it something that can happen. I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. We got 100 people who have gone through this program as of fall, and more are interested every day because they see the need for high quality teachers, and they see that it's time for them to step up to the plate and be that high quality teacher. And also, another aspect of the program that hopefully will start to come to fruition is to start recruiting in high school, recruiting some of the people who are in high school that may be interested in education, having them start as paraprofessionals, just so that they know what it's like to be in the classroom environment. They know what it's like to teach.
Mr. Keys, if I could ask you to summarize, you're well over time.
Oh, my bad. That's my thing. That's my thing, and I love this program. I had a lot to do.
I let you because I'm
But
really
that's the
interested
answer.
in this.
That's the answer.
Thank you, and thanks to all the witnesses. This is a really important topic. I think I have some Virginia teachers in the room, maybe some from Fairfax. They recently had a collective bargaining vote that I applaud you on. The title of this hearing is long. The piece I'm interested in is teacher shortages and everything that contributes to them, and you've all talked a little bit about that. My wife is a member of the Virginia State Board of Education, appointed by the governor to oversee K-12 schooling in Virginia. She's the last one on the board appointed by a Democratic governor. Everyone else on the board is appointed by the current Republican governor. But I can tell you the one nonpartisan issue they grapple with is teacher shortages all over the Commonwealth. All over the Commonwealth, particularly in high poverty schools. There was a study in UVA, out of UVA this spring, 80% of all vacant positions were in the 20% of schools with the greatest number of vacancies. And those schools tend to be high poverty schools, which tend to be either within central cities or in rural Virginia. Some of the shortages are acute in some areas. Special ed is a topical area where the shortages are acute, but they're generally acute in high poverty schools. The students who most need good teachers in the classroom are the students likely to be in schools with high numbers of vacancies. And I think you've all done a good job of kind of explaining some of the challenges. One thing that was not mentioned that I do think should be mentioned is teachers' fears for their own safety. Some of you touched upon it, but no one mentioned gun violence. Nobody mentioned gun violence. Teachers do active shooter drills with their kids. That wasn't the case when I was in school. It wasn't really the case when my kids were in the Richmond public schools. It's the norm now. And a teacher said to me recently, we all do a moment of silence now. And I don't know what the kids are thinking about, but I know what every adult in a school is thinking about during the moment of silence. And it's let today not be the day. Let today not be the day. And that's got to be daunting for teachers and other adults who work in school systems, just like it's daunting for parents. My kids went to an urban school system, probably 90% free and reduced lunch. I didn't worry when I dropped them off in the morning about picking them up at the end of the day. I didn't worry about it. And they finished school just 15 years ago, but this is something that parents worry about now, teachers worry about now, kids worry about now. I was going to ask that question, Mr. Keys, about the pathway program, because I think that really is a solution. Senator Collins and I have a bill called the PREP Act that looks at grow your own, because if somebody has been a paraprofessional in the school system and has demonstrated the ability to compassionately deal with all kinds of students, but they don't have the credential yet to be a teacher, you know they're going to be a successful teacher if you can get them to that credential. So I'm a big supporter of programs like the one you describe, and we do have bipartisan legislation to try to advance that here. Mr. Arthur, I wanted to ask you about a part of your background, which was national teacher certification. Dr. Kirwan talked a little bit about this. My experience in Virginia, but I'm wondering about the Utah experiences. Every once in a while in Virginia, we would do a one-time bonus for people that got national teacher certification. But then if the budget was bad next year, it would disappear. So you wouldn't get a continued salary bump, and the person who wanted to get board certified next year wouldn't have that incentive to do it. I think while teacher salary is something that is primarily a state and local responsibility, I think it could at the federal level be a federal thing. We're talking about national certification. If we wanted a high percentage of our teachers to have national certification, that could be something at the federal level that would be smart to incentivize. Talk a little bit about, were you incentivized in Utah to do this? Did you just take it on because you wanted to do it? What was the Utah program under which you became certified, and did it increase your salary?
Absolutely, Senator. I receive a stipend every year, both from my district and my state. When I first went through national board certification, I did so just because I wanted to be better for children. I was motivated by what I was seeing in the classrooms of national board certified teachers. But when someone told me I would get paid more, I was like, okay, all right, that's nice. I won't have to ask my wife so much for the money. And it's not much. It's not enough right now to move people into this. I get about, roughly in Utah, about $4,000 extra year, or every year, because I teach in a Title I school, and I teach in a district that supports that, but not all districts do. States have different programs for this. So if there was a way to make sure that teachers across our country were all incentivized to become the most accomplished educator that they could be, the benefits to our children, the research shows, would be profound.
And Dr. Kirwan, again, remind me of, in the Maryland plan, what you do around national board certification.
When a teacher becomes board certified, they get an increase in salary of $10,000. And that continues in their salary. It is independent of the year. That's part of their base as long as they are board certified. So when they have to be renewed, they continue. And Senator Kane, it's had a very interesting consequence. I just learned today, in fact, that Maryland led the nation in the number of teachers who got board certified last year. Maryland is a relatively small state, 6 million people, but it led the nation, more than California, more than New York. And I think that that salary increase has been obviously played a big role in making that happen.
And if I could, it's a salary increase, but it's a salary increase for doing a lot of work that makes you a better teacher. And the salary increase, even in your case in Utah, where it's somewhat modest, it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of respect for the profession. And so I think that has a number of positives. And I am now over time, and I'm going to yield to Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And I want to start by highlighting that I am proud of the Boston Public School System for their prioritizing of equity and inclusion for their students. They aim to ensure that Black and brown students have the same opportunities to achieve, and that we address the systemic racism that plagued our schools nationally. And they work hard to guarantee that LGBTQ kids are not shamed for their identity. I strongly disagree that programs that aim to support and include students based on gender, sexuality, or race detract from student learning. In fact, I'm proud that Boston Public Schools look to include and celebrate all children, because that is how we guarantee that every student has the opportunity to grow and to learn. Right now, 1/3 of K-12 public school staff working full-time make less than $25,000 per year. Less than $25,000 per year. 1/3 of those staff in public schools in our country. I received a letter from a paraprofessional named CJ who works with students with autism in the Boston public school system and is a member of the Boston Teachers Union. CJ, like far too many paraprofessionals, is being forced to choose between the profession he is called to and basic financial security. CJ's students and their families will suffer if he has to leave the field of education. But if CJ can't make rent or care for his elderly mother, how can we expect him to stay in the school system? We cannot expect school staff to keep our students safe and healthy and learning when they are paid starvation wages. We need the Pay Teachers Act, and we need a Pay Paraprofessionals and Education Support Staff Act as well. Mr. Keys, how did your wages as a paraprofessional impact you and your students?
My wages as a paraprofessional, how they impacted me? They impacted me because I needed a second job. You know, I couldn't survive off of just paraprofessional wages. That $16,000, I was at the $30,000 when I switched over to teaching. Even that wasn't enough. And a lot of my paraprofessional colleagues, they're looking to other districts and they're seeing that there's no real difference in the pay. And the things that they deal with, they absolutely deserve to make more money. My paraprofessionals, they run the show for me when I can't. The last week of school, they did everything because I was so swamped with paperwork. They deserve to be paid for that. Paraprofessionals are teachers. They're just not certified. All of the teachers who I worked with, they treated me with the same level of respect that they wanted to be given in return. So I feel as though there definitely should be fairness in pay when it comes to paraprofessionals. They're just like me.
Yeah. In my first year out of college, I worked for that whole year as a substitute teacher, which is not a paraprofessional, but I could also see how indispensable they were to making sure that the
Couldn't
school
do my job without them.
did work. Mr. Arthur, as a teacher, why is it important to guarantee school buildings are as resilient to climate change as the resilience educators and students demonstrate in the face of intensifying climate crisis?
I apologize, Senator. Could you restate that question?
Yeah, why do we need to ensure that the the working conditions of teachers, but also the studying conditions of students have healthy environments within which they will be working.
Absolutely. Yeah, unhealthy adults who are dealing with stress and burnout, have a hard time helping to prepare children to be healthy going forward in life. Our school climates are beautifully determined by the school community in which those people work. And I tell you, it makes me think, this graph, I keep looking at it. It's not just because I teach sixth grade math. It's just fascinating to me. And I swear, I have Sharpies in my room. I change graphs all the time. I just wish I could go up to that graph, cross out spending, and write salaries for school staff. And then just like leave it and watch over the next 5 years what those two colored lines do in terms of student achievement. And if suddenly you have fully staffed schools with high-paid, not just teachers, but paraprofessionals, school counselors, and all the other people that are critical in helping to educate and uplift children, then you will not only have better school climates, you will have better student scores, you will have everything that we're looking for in education. Man, anybody got a Sharpie?
Thank you. Yeah, so
Yeah.
no, you're right on the money, and it's why I introduced my Preparing and Retaining All Educators, the para-educators bill, to provide grants to schools for the types of pathway programs that allow school staff to grow and to thrive, increase wages, scholarships for credentialing and further education, high-quality professional development. So it's just essential that every paraprofessional in every state have access to and financial resources for high-quality career pathway programs. I heard you, Mr. Keys. I heard what you were saying. I agree with you. We just have to focus upon the resources to make sure we get that job done.
Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to thank you and the ranking member for having this hearing, and I know I'm running late. We're all juggling different hearings and engagements today, but I wanted to start with Mr. Keys, and I really appreciate the work you're doing in Philly. I wanted to focus on what we all would hope every student has the opportunity to experience, which is a safe, inclusive, and supportive learning environment. With that goal in mind, I'm working to advance bills that will provide schools, educators, and students with the resources they need to thrive. One piece of legislation I've introduced now for a number of years, the Safe Schools Improvement Act, would require school districts to establish codes of conduct that specifically prohibit bullying and harassment among students, which supports the safety and inclusion of all children. Another bill I've recently introduced is the Showing Up for Students Act, which will provide additional funding for the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education. This office's mission is to ensure that all students have equal access to education, that all students can learn in a safe and supportive classroom. This has become especially urgent in the wake of the anti-Semitism that we see on campuses, but it's also important in every year, every era, when we have on, whether it's a college campus or any other educational environment, instances of racism or anti-Semitism or any kind of discrimination. The Department of Education is charged with the responsibility to make a determination, a very specific, evidence-based, fact-based determination as to whether or not there is a hostile environment on that campus or in that school setting for students. That Office of Civil Rights in no way has the resources that it needs. It needs to hire, in my judgment, hundreds more to carry out its responsibility to complete the investigations they've already undertaken. So I'll continue to fight for that funding, and anyone who says they care about what's happening on our campuses should support the funding for the Office of Civil Rights. So, Mr. Keys, with that predicate, what resources do you need and do you feel that are necessary both as an educator and as a leader to ensure that all students can succeed, especially students with disabilities in the district?
What resources do I need? Better training, more focused training on the specifics to the populations that we work with, whether it's autism whether it's a child with multiple disabilities, whether it's somebody who needs learning support. There needs to be better focused training, not just for teachers, but for paraprofessional staff as well, because 99% of the time, we're the ones, teachers, we're the ones training our staff on how to work with these students. Now, mind you, we have to teach, we gotta maintain paperwork, we have to make sure that our kids are happy and healthy and safe. There's a lot of things under the umbrella for the salary that we make. And most of the times, you have teachers who are not very well seasoned and able to effectively train their paraprofessional staff because they've never been trained effectively themselves. I was lucky. Every teacher I worked with had been there 30, 29 years. So I got that training. So what I do is I pass that on to everybody who I cross paths with within my school, even down to school climate staff, which a lot of those were former paraprofessionals as well. So that goes in tandem with what you said about making sure that children are safe and they're able to access their education and not have to deal with all of the harsh realities of the world that we're dealing with while they're in that school building.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your leadership and the fact that you've served as both a teacher and a paraprofessional, I think, indicates your experience is significant. I wanted to highlight that both the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers and the district recognizes the talent and dedication of their paraprofessionals, and they're thinking of ways to creatively address the teacher shortage. What aspects of the paraprofessional to teacher program were most helpful to you? And secondly, what can the federal government do to encourage the development of these grow your own programs at the local level?
What was most helpful to me and what's going to be most helpful to my colleagues is eliminating that debt that comes along with going back to school. Because again, when you think about paraprofessionals, remember, they're some of the lowest paid in education. They still have to survive out here in the world while they're trying to get to that next level of their career. And even myself, I didn't have to pay for this master's degree, but I got 2 other degrees that coming soon, I'm gonna have to start paying back. So the financial aspect was the most helpful part of it. And what kind of scares me about it is there's no guarantee that that money is going to be there in the future. You know, so I think the federal government can help by ensuring that there's funding for programs such as the Parapathways program to, again, promote and grow your own, because you have the people there. You have the teachers there already. They just need that last bit of help.
Thank you very much.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to try and get in 3 questions, so I'm going to cut off the answers at about 40 seconds. Famous last words. Dr. Kirwan, you talked a little bit about learning things from other countries. In Colorado, we've worked a lot on creating apprenticeship programs. We took a whole group, 50 people, to Switzerland to study their processes. How have you seen other countries use apprenticeships to recruit and maintain or retain educators?
Senator Hickenlooper, thank you for that question. The commission I chaired studied in great depth these apprenticeship programs and are so impressed by the impact they're having on the economy in these countries. And so we have built that into the blueprint. The goal of the blueprint is to get most kids to career and college ready by the end of the 10th grade. And then they have the option of 3 pathways. One would be advanced placement, another would be early college, and a third pathway is a career and technical education pathway. And in that pathway, students would be expected to complete an apprenticeship or some other industry-certified credential.
Experiential.
Just based exactly on what we learn from these countries. You know, not every kid needs to go to college. There are wonderful jobs out there.
I got it. I agree.
Okay.
And I'm going to cut you off.
All
I
right,
apologize.
thank you.
This is the new Hickenlooper at the table. Mr. Keys, I think that the experience as a paraprofessional and an educator, a teacher, is so valuable. Earlier this year, the Walton Family Foundation and Gallup did a poll that showed that 48% of Gen Z middle and high school students feel motivated to go to school. That's 48%. The rest don't. I think it's critical that kids feel inspired and motivated to go to school. And whether you're going into an apprenticeship or a 2-year program, a 4-year program, what should we be doing to reach out to students who may be struggling to find inspiration at the school where they're at? How can we reach out to them in the first place to encourage them to consider a future career, let's say in teaching, when they're struggling in school themselves?
What I would say is give them options. Show them that it's not, while they might be having difficulties now, you provide additional supplemental support. You give them options on what's next. Like, okay, myself, I didn't go to college right out of high school. I wish that I had someone sit down with me and explain it. Well, you can do this. Well, you can move into a technical school. You can do career training. There's so many different options out there. School is hard. It is. But when you know you have somebody in your corner supporting you, it makes it a little less hard, and it makes you want to push through, so to speak. And another thing that we could do as far as recruiting those same students into education, offering them positions starting off at the lower tiered education positions, such as bus attendant and paraprofessional. These allow them time to figure out what they want to do and if it's for them, like it did for me.
I like it. Nice. Appreciate that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about early literacy. And I think this notion of how do we get the right guidance counselors, the right support, I think, Dr. Kirwan, you have made that clear that that's a big part of this. I look at, and I've have struggled when I was younger, still struggle with dyslexia, very, very slow reader. Senator Cassidy and I have both worked on this in various ways. I look at the recent assessment by the NAEP that 33% of fourth graders were reading at grade level. That's unacceptable and obviously several points back from where we slipped in 2019 from where we were. Mr. Pondiscio, what does your research experience tell you about why so many people are still struggling, and what does the federal government need to do to better prepare teachers, students, to significantly improve the literacy?
The bad news is we've struggled to teach reading properly for decades. The good news is we have an emerging so-called science of reading movement in this country, which I'm encouraged by, with a caveat. If we have the idea that is at loose in the land that it's about phonics, then we will fall short. I like to point out that in my South Bronx classroom, which was literally the lowest performing school in New York City's lowest performing district, where I taught for several years, I literally never had a single child who was a non-reader. They could all decode, as we say. Kids could read. They struggled with comprehension. So I'm optimistic about the science of reading movement. It should be encouraged at all levels of government, but that's the starting line. The decoding and phonics practices get kids to the starting line. I am a disciple of a man named E.D. Hirsch Jr., who's the son of Virginia, and his core knowledge curriculum, because that's exactly what my students in the South Bronx were lacking. Rich content in history, in art, in music, in literature, et cetera. Once we get kids to the decoding science, the decoding starting line, then it's all that rich vocabulary and content that needs to be encouraged in order for kids to become language proficient.
Appreciate that. And I'm over time. I apologize.
It's the old Senator Hickenlooper.
No. I was under the wire there with the question.
All right, let's.
Thank
Thank you. Senator Cassidy, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, just Mr. Arthur said he would love to take this graph, which shows spending in schools far exceeding inflation rate, yet scores going down, and change it, in which he would look at teacher pay. I think you agree with Ms. Neely. She pointed out that there's a lot of money going for things which seem unrelated to instruction. And in the document which I submitted for adoption, it points out that there's a school in Chicago, 35 students in a building which holds over 900. There's 23 staffers. The average cost per student is $68,000. So let's assume there's 2 teachers there, say 4. It's a lot of money. And that the union will not let them close the huge building for these 35 students. And indeed, their latest contract wants to add 8 more staffers. There'll be 33 staffers for 35 students. I think that if there's a conclusion from this, it is that there is a misallocation of dollars. And if we want to raise teacher pay, recognizing how much more spending we're doing, we have to focus on teachers and not on things which are extraneous. I yield.
I think when we look at the issue of education in America and the challenges, significant challenges we face, it's also important to take a look at how, as a nation, we feel about our kids. Are our children a very high priority? Does anyone really think that, as a nation, we believe that? Now, if we believe that, we would not have 9 million children living in poverty. We would not have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any nation on earth. Dr. Kirwan has looked at countries around the world. Many countries around the world understand that the most important years of emotional and intellectual development are 0 through 5. That's what we are told by every psychologist who studies the issue. And yet we have a child care system which A, is unaffordable for millions of working class families, B, pays child care workers even worse than we pay public school educators. People are working for less than McDonald's, doing some of the most important work in the country. And yet, as Dr. Kirwan mentioned, there are countries around the world, and perhaps Maryland is beginning to do that, and say, you know what? Child care is enormously important. If kids are going to get off to a good start in life, open the doors. Let's have decent paid teachers, and let's not worry about the cost of that, because we're going to save money long-term if these kids do well in school, okay? So I think, as a nation, we do have to ask ourselves a fundamental question about our priorities. If 4 hedge fund managers today, at a time when we have massive income wealth inequality in America, 4 hedge company executives making more money than every kindergarten teacher in this country, maybe there's something wrong with our national priorities. This country does not survive unless we have the best education in the world for our kids. We're not going to compete economically. We're not going to see our kids flourish. So I'm always impressed that when it comes to defense spending, hey, we could spend $1 trillion a year, bills come out of committee 20-1, no debate. Massive tax breaks to billionaires, hey, not a problem. But maybe to address why it is that we're paying teachers in this country inadequate wages, oh my word, that's just an impossible task. Federal government can't get involved in it. So I think it's time not only to take a hard look at education in general, but to take a look at our national priorities and to take a look at how we treat the children of our country. With that, this hearing comes to an end. Any senators who wish to ask additional questions must do so by June 27th at 5 p.m. Committee stands adjourned. Thank you.